now somebody uses it for every project, amen. And some of you have never used it. So I think today's presentation is kind of good for everybody because we're going to start from like, what is Postman, to how you can learn just enough to be super powerful with it and really speed up the development of your APIs. So beginning with what is Postman, or I'll give a quick roadmap of what we'll talk about. We're going to talk about what it is, how to get it, what requests and responses and how to deal with cookies are, a thing called collections, and a thing called workspaces. And in my experience, like if you understand all 5 of these things, you are in a very sweet spot for much more efficient development, but also you know enough about Postman to become interested and become a superpower user. So I've been saying Postman, 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 and some of you may be wondering what that is. And basically it's just a tool for like managing requests and responses to APIs. You can think of it like you have your API and you have a client that consumes the API. And there's that point of interaction between them. And Postman is kind of like that right there in the middle, right at that interception point. And it's kind of creating a space there for you to inspect what's going on when your API meets the client or when the client meets the API. So aside from having like the most adorable logo ever that will decorate your desktop nicely, it makes visualizing things that are sometimes difficult to visualize without a graphical interface much cleaner. You can organize your mental model of an API much more easily with Postman. So how do you get it? You just go to this link. I'll share the slides with you guys in a bit. And you can download it for Mac, Windows, Linux. Actually, fun fact, Postman just released a new version of their desktop app like Friday, I think last week. So it's new, it's clean. For those of you who have said you've used it before or just a little, like maybe you've been overwhelmed with the interface of Postman because there's like a lot of different, docked, windows. There's a lot to see here because Postman is so powerful. And I think the Postman team was aware that maybe their interface was a bit intimidating or didn't reveal all of the cool things that Postman can do. So they've released version 8 with a much more simplified interface that you see on the screen. And I'm just started playing with this weekend, and I'm learning like lots of even cooler features of Postman since they've updated it. So if you already have Postman, I recommend going out and getting the new UI. I have it here in dark mode, but they also have a light mode. So we've been talking about how Postman can help you kind of inspect that space between the API and the client. So whenever you make a request, you get a response from an API. And we can take a look at how Postman can help us introspect those things. Real quick, I'll just take a quick tour of the Postman UI. This is the thing you see when you open Postman. And you'll see on the left, we've kind of got a navigation menu that says like history. These are all of the requests that you've ever made in Postman chronologically. A thing called collections we'll talk about in a bit. And this big empty space. This is kind of our workspace. And you can start a new request, like if you're making an HTTP request, just by clicking this little plus. And it's going to come up with this menu for you to set up your request headers and body. And if there's any auth that you need for your request or params, you can take care of all of that here. So you can see this little drop down is quite important. It tells you what HTTP verb you're going to use. So you've got get, post, you got all these ones I've even never heard of. Again, Postman gives you every option under the sun. I mostly only use the get and the post, but you can use what you'd like. Params are like for adding query params at the end of a URL. So for example, when you're using a web browser, you're really just making get requests to get HTML. And we can see that in action here if we try to go to Google. So you can say, put in the Google URL here and make a get request there and hit send. So it's going off fetching the data, and returning the response down here. So the upper half of the screen is request world, and the bottom half is response world. And you get all sorts of details about the response, including many different ways to view the response. For example, you can, right now it's in pretty mode, but you can see it raw if you're into that kind of thing. You can see a preview mode. If it's an HTML document, for example, it's going to try to render the HTML to the best it can. You'll see that the images aren't showing up here. That's because they're kind of a separate GET request. And for some data, you can actually visualize it, but not for HTML. You can see, we've just looked at the body, but you can see what kind of cookies were returned from that request. You can see all of the headers that come back with it in the response. And if you had written test, you could see test, but we'll talk about that later. And of course, just the overview stuff, like, oh, this is a status 200 response, and the time, the size, and everything. You can even save the response to like a file if you'd like to, for whatever reason. Yeah, so that's the overview of a basic GET request. And feel free, you guys, to turn your mic on and shout out a comment or a question at any time. I sometimes miss the chat, but you can also shoot your questions into the chat. Okay, so that's a super simple GET request for getting HTML. But what about, getting data like JSON objects and that kind of thing? One use case of that would be, for example, if you're doing a Mintbean hackathon and you want to use an API, like a stocks API or something, and you need to test out like what kind of response comes back so that you can map it into your, oh, somebody just mentioned making Postman a bit bigger here. Let's see. I don't know if I can zoom it bigger, but you guys have any magnifying glasses on your end? Because I think this might be the best I can do. View, oh, zoom in. Hey, sweet. See, Postman does everything. Can you guys give me, oh, Control plus? Nice. We've got some Postman power users in the audience. Is this good enough? Can you give me a thumbs up if it is? Okay. All right, so now that you can see, we're gonna do another request to see what kind of like JSON data we can get back. So as an example, we can go ahead and check out the SpaceX API, which is a simple REST API for getting data about SpaceX. And here's the documentation. I think SpaceX even teamed up with Postman to kind of sponsor this API. But let's see what kind of stuff we can get from SpaceX. You get launch pads, launches. That could be interesting. Starlink. I don't know a lot about SpaceX. I know that rockets are a thing. So how about we get some rockets? So we're going to try to make this request in Postman. And we know the end point, but we need to know the base URL too. So let's see if that's in the documentation. All right, here's the base URL. So I'm going to make a new request here, a GET request to the SpaceX URL, and we need to get the rocket. I think it was a rocket, singular. History, Starlink ships or rockets. Okay, so we're going to get all of the rockets at SpaceX, and I'm just going to click send. So it sent my request out and displays my response down here. And you'll see it returned an array of objects, which I assume are rockets. And you can see like this particular rocket is tall. You know all the details about it. It's got that many engines. It's got all this data here. And another cool thing is if you see any links that appear in the response, you can click on it and it's going to actually generate a new Postman request for you. So let's look at the images of this rocket. It opened a new request in a new tab for getting that image asset. So you can click send and you can see the image right here in Postman, which is pretty nice. But I'm going to exit out of that. So that was really simple. And now I can check out this data. And if I'm making, for example, like a a Rockets dashboard UI or something for the hackathon, I know how to map this data into my client. Any questions so far? So Louise, can you explain how to connect VS Code to Postman? At the end of the talk today, I'll kind of go into that, but right now I'm just going to stick to the Postman desktop app. So yeah, feel free to shoot any more questions in the chat at any time. All right, so that was a simple GET request. A POST request is a similar beast, except usually with a POST request, you're going to send some body along with it, right? And that's where you can have a little fun with setting extra things in your request. So you can see the body tab here, and it gives you a ton of options of what type of body you're going to be sending. For example, you might have form data. I think either of these is for using form data for like an HTML form. You can also, this one is used quite often, you use this raw type of body, and you can tell what type of raw it is. So you can send like HTML, you can send JSON, you can send JavaScript, text, XML. Oftentimes you'll be sending like a raw JSON. And you'll see if you start typing something in here, it knows that it's JSON, it's gonna format it like JSON. You can even send a file. And importantly, for those of you that are developing GraphQL APIs or consuming GraphQL APIs, you can also use GraphQL queries and GraphQL query variables. And actually, why don't we go ahead and just try a GraphQL query to see how that would work? I don't know how many of you have experience with GraphQL, but it's another hot new way to make APIs. And for this example, I found this free API for jobs called API GraphQL jobs. And it doesn't really have documentation, but for those of you that have used GraphQL, you know that it's kind of an auto-documenting schema language. So you can click here and see all of the queries that are available for these jobs. And I'm going to go ahead and try to get some jobs. And to do that, this is the query for getting jobs in GraphQL. So first things first, going to steal this endpoint. And the difference with, for those of you not familiar with GraphQL, it's different from REST in that it's just a single endpoint. And you specify kind of your sub endpoints by naming a query or a mutation, where a query is for reading data from a database, and a mutation is for updating or changing data in a database. So if you were to translate like your normal HTTP head verbs, like get, post, patch, etc., I would say like query kind of maps to a GET request, and post, patch, delete, all of that stuff maps to a mutation in GraphQL. We're kind of doing the GET. We're trying to get a list of jobs. So we're going to use a query in GraphQL. But the interesting thing is, if you're using GraphQL, you're always making a post request because you're posting a body with the query in it. So we can check out the menu here and we'll see, okay, this query called jobs, I need to make this query. So for those of you that are not familiar with the syntax of GraphQL, you tell if it's a query to mutation, you give a nickname to the query, I'm just going to call it jobs, and you can specify whether this query takes variables. And this is all from the documentation. Like you wouldn't know this off the top of your head. You have to know what the documentation is expecting, or the API is expecting. So here I see jobs has input jobs input, and it's going to return an array of jobs. And all right, that's part of the query done. Now I have to actually write. This part is like the endpoint in a REST API. So I'm going to say this is the actual implementation, jobs input and input. So this looks really redundant, and I feel that way about GraphQL, but basically it's saying this, you're going to pass some variables in and you're going to call the data input. And when we're actually making our query down here, we're going to apply the input variable in our as an argument in our query. So for those of you that haven't used GraphQL, you should know that it's kind of dynamic. You can request what kind of data you want back. And it's like with a REST API, you're always going to get the same shape of object back. With GraphQL, you can say, hey, I want the ID, I want the name, I want the description of the job, I want the location, all of that. So that's what we're going to do. What can we get? Well, we have to look at the documentation. And I see we've got all these options. What's interesting about a job? I think I'll take the title and maybe the city. Yeah, what cities it's in. All right, so what else is there? That's good enough for me. All right, so we're gonna take the title. And we can make this simple request first and then add stuff onto it. So remember how we have some variables over here? With the GraphQL body type in Postman, it gives you this right-hand special menu for defining those variables, and you can define them as a JSON object. So we have to feed it something called input. And the data, what is jobs input? Well, again, we'll have to look at the documentation. We've got jobs input, and I think down here, it defines what job input is. It looks like it's an object with a type, and it can have one of these optionally, or both of these optionally. So a type string, let's see, type. And actually, I don't know what types there are. Let's see if developer is a type. All right, so we'll try to send this request and see if we get any jobs back. Yeah, okay, good guess. So it looks like there's an array of these jobs available. That's cool. What else can we find out about the jobs? I feel like there was apply URL. So say you want to make an API that applies for jobs for you. You can just test out with Postman what types of data you get back. So you can design an app that will create job applications for you. So now you can see the title and the apply URL for all of these jobs. So I just wanted to point out that you can make many types of requests in Postman. You can make requests to a REST API. You can make a request to, just get HTML from a website. You can make a GraphQL request. The only kind of gotcha with GraphQL is even if you're like querying something, which you might think is like a get type of operation, make sure you're using post for all GraphQL types. All right, I'm going to check the chat for any questions you guys might have. What are the exclamations for? Yeah, that's a GraphQL syntax for saying that this field is required. And I think somebody, already answered that. Okay, you with me so far? All right, so we're starting to rank up all these tabs up here. And you'll see that there's this little like unsaved button. And that's because, yes, you do have the option to save a request. And to do that, for example, say you wanted to save google.com. It's a request you make often, I don't know. Actually, no, let's save the jobs one, because let's say every morning you wake up and you want to see what jobs are available. So you can just click here and there's a little save button on the right, and you can say save as. You can give it a special name, like get all the jobs, and you can give it a description if you like, and then you can save it in what's called a collection. So we'll get to this a bit later, but a collection is basically just a folder that can hold a group of requests for you. And I don't really have a place for it. I'm just going to put it in a demo folder, and you'll see these are my collection of requests in the demo folder here. I've got get weather, get jobs. And now, like if you close Postman, open it up later, you can always come back to the demo collection, open up, get all the jobs, and hit send. And you'll get all the jobs. And the cool thing is you can edit this, like say, oh, it's Wednesday, I don't want to be like a developer anymore. I want to be, I don't know. I want to do something in the back end. See if anything comes up. Well, I guess so. But you can change stuff in your requests after they've been saved. And you don't have to save it. So it's kind of becomes like a template that you can reuse requests and interchange bits and pieces of it to your liking. So it really gives you a lot of power. It's kind of like sitting at the dashboard of a spaceship, and you can press any button to kind of go anywhere in the web. Okay, so that's the intro to requests and responses and saving them. A couple other cute tricks to know is, let's see, with like a GET request to Google, for example. Let's see. Oh yeah, all of these have code gen capabilities. So let's say like you've kind of graphically designed a request up here. You've put in any headers and body. You can click this little code thing on the right, and it's going to generate code for you in a ton of languages. So you got your classic curl here, like say you're writing a CLI application and you need to know how to make this request from the CLI. You can see right here. For those of you JavaScript people making a fetch request, you can just kind of copy paste this and it will be your request. So in addition to being a great tool for actually inspecting APIs, I find Postman is a really good learning tool because you can really visualize like all the headers that come along with the requests, all of the what comes back in the body, but also kind of the way to construct requests in various languages here. All right, so we've done request and response. Now let's have a little fun with cookies. And you know what a cookie is. Like in the browser, you visit a website and the website sends you back a cookie. It gets saved in your browser in a folder that's kind of pertains to the website that you're at, and it can save data about, you know, like a session. It could save data about your light theme, dark theme preferences, so that when you come back to that website, you have persisting data. And oftentimes we'll be concerned about cookies in our APIs. For example, if you're using authentication that requires cookies. And to demonstrate both at the same time, like how I use Postman when I'm developing APIs and also how to use it with cookies, I'm going to show you a little demo app that I've been working on. It's a game, and it's called 123 because it's a game for interpreters to practice interpreting numbers. And the premise is you select a language and it's going to give you random numbers and speak them out loud. And your job is to say them in another language. And it's going to use speech recognition to compare if you got the number right or wrong. And you try to get as many in a row as you can, and you get points for the number of digits and all that kind of thing. And it has auth because you have you sign into an account so that you can have your little name here in the leaderboard. So I'll show you how it works. Like you log in and you can click on a language like English and say try. You click start and there's a countdown.
34.
And I don't know if you can hear, but it's reading numbers out loud.
22.
And the app is work in progress, but the idea is instead of typing like I am now, you would be speaking this out loud in another language.
130.
And you get a streak for like as many as you get in a row.
409.
And if you mess up enough,
464.
your lives start to go down.
487.
And once you die 3 times, game over. And your score gets sent to the leaderboard if your score is high enough. And I use Postman heavily to develop this full stack app because, first of all, it was my first time developing a full stack app from scratch in Node with authentication. So I had a lot of debugging to do in Postman. And to demonstrate that, because now I have it working, let's log out as Randy for a second and we'll check what's going on with my cookies. We've got localhost 8080 and we've got these 4 cookies right now. But when you log in as Randy, you're logged in, you'll notice a JWT cookie was added to this domain. And this is actually how the browser knows that you are logged in currently and you are logged in as Randy, because the server sends back this long string, which is a JSON web token. So it's kind of a secretly encoded object with a bunch of data inside of it, including the current user's name. And so how do we handle this with Postman? Like, this is the code for the API side of the app. And you'll see here, these are all the routes. You log in and log out by making a post request to this endpoint. So let's try that out in Postman. I'm going to go ahead and make a new request and try to log into my app. So the base URL in our case is going to be localhost. All right, so I'll type it out. We're going to make a post request to localhost, and my database is at 4444. And I think actually with localhost, you got to give it the protocol, HTTP localhost 4444. And the endpoint was login. And login takes a body. What do I need to give it? So I'll check out my API auth and look for login. Okay, it looks like I'm extracting username and password from the body. And let's see, right now it's body none. We're going to give it a JSON body. So remember, you go to raw JSON and it needs a username. So we had Randy and a password. And now you all are going to see Randy's password, which was integrity. All right, so why are we doing this? Because I want to show you this cool thing that Postman does with cookies. And we'll take a look over here at the cookies in our current Postman instance. And I've got some from Google, from SpaceX, because of that request we just did, and the GraphQL jobs. All of these websites actually came back with cookies in their response. But I have nothing from localhost yet. So let's go ahead and make this post request. Bam, I got a response. That means I'm logged in. And also you'll see it came along with some cookies. And remember, that's the JWT token that we saw in the browser. And here it is. We can take a look at this. For those of you that know about JSON Web Token, you know that you can decode it with this really cool tool. And that was too much data. So you'll see that JSON Web Token in the cookie gets decoded as this object here. And you'll see that username Randy is here and when his session is going to expire. So we're logged in as Randy now. And the coolest part about Postman is this is going to persist. So now any requests that you make after this, you already have Randy's JWT token stored in Postman. So it's going to make a request as if you were logged in as Randy. So this is useful for saying, you want to test some things, like, or you're starting to develop a feature in your app that needs authorization. You need to be logged in as somebody. So now I can make a new request logged in as Randy. For example, let's see, what else we got here? How about me? So me is used at the endpoint get me. So I'm just going to go to Postman and I'm going to make a new request. I'm going to copy this URL. And instead of posting to login, we're going to get me. And what do you predict is going to happen now that we're logged in as Randy? I hope it comes back as Randy, and it does. So you can see how powerful this is. Now, what I like to do when I'm building an API is start to build a library of all of these requests so that you can basically point and click your way through operating your API. And so, for example, let's just save this, like save as, you give it a better name, like login, and we'll make a new folder, or no, a new, yeah, we'll go in the demo collection. And inside demo, we can make a the 123 app and save it to 123. Now you'll see inside demo, we've got our login request saved here. We can always come back and log in. Same, I'm going to save the me. So save as me and save it in 123, same spot. So we're starting to build a library. What else would be good to have? Probably the log out, which I know is a post request and takes no body. So let's check this. All right, so that log out request is working. So I'm going to go ahead and save that one as well. Call it logout and save it to the 123 folder. So now I've got all of these auth-based operations here, and I can have fun all day just logging in and logging out and finding out me. Oh, I'm not logged in, so this shouldn't come back with anything. You become like it's a point and click interface now. I don't need a graphical interface to interact with my, or a front end first, I should say, to interact with my API, because I can access all the operations here. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, and I actually will show you the collection I've got going of all the possible operations for the API so far. So this is my 123 app, and I've got the login, logout, and me that we just did, but I also have like posting scores and that kind of thing. So it's the same story. You'll come in here and you can see, oh, this is how I post a score to my API. At this endpoint, I give it this body and hit send. Now you'll notice something looks a little funky in here. And you'll see there's this orange like base URL thing. And that's because if you go back to the sample we had going in 123, you'll notice something is very repetitive about our request, in that they're all localhost 4444 over and over again. And also this request is limited to my API existing at localhost 444. Say that I publish my app to production, it's like www.123.com. I need to go back and duplicate all of these and change the URL from localhost 444 to 123.com. So the cool thing about Postman is it lets you build environments. And to do that, it's in this upper right here. So you can create a new environment by clicking on this little settings icon. And I have a ton of environments going right now, but to add, you just click add and say like my test app environment for 123. And here, just like you would have environment variables in say your applications.env folder file, you can name an environment variable and give it a value. So we're going to go ahead and give it the one that we keep using for testing the app. So our dev environment is localhost 444. And it lets you have an initial value and a current value. And if you hover over it, it's going to say, this is the value, initial value is shared with your team. So we're going to get to that, how you can share your collections. But this is kind of like the canonical value. And the current values just mean like it will override the initial value. So I've created an environment called test app. And now I can access the test app environment by clicking this drop-down menu. So now we're in the test app world, meaning that the variable named base URL is going to have this value, localhost 444. So now I can just use the interpolation syntax, which is 2 curly braces, and plug in the base URL login, and I can make the same request. So I think I'm logged out. I'm going to go ahead and log out and log in as Randy again. And it came back successfully. It interpolated base URL based on our environment. Okay, so now you guys know how to make get and post requests in both like the REST context and GraphQL. You know how to save those requests. You know how to save them into collections. And you know how to set up request environments in Postman. And so what else can you do? Well, the answer is a ton, but in the scope of our time today, we're just going to say what you can do with these collections that you make. So you've got a healthy amount of collection or requests in your collection now, for example, here. And let's say you're on a development team and you want to share this with other people so they can also have this point and click interface with the API. You can do that by sharing with a team workspace. So right now I'm kind of in my own private workspace. This is my world and nobody else can see this stuff. But you can create a team and have a separate team workspace. For example, I work at Mintbean and we have a Mintbean team workspace, which is here. And to create a new team, you just click create new. I can show you in a bit how the workspace works. Actually, let's go ahead and switch over. So I've entered the team workspace and my whole context has switched to the team context. And you'll see this is the Mintbean platform Postman request collection. And these are all the things you can do with our Mintbean API. And this is private, it's just shared with our team. But the cool thing is I can add something in here. Like say I wrote a new feature and it's like when I did the Kanban feature, I had to make a couple of endpoints for adding Kanban cards and reading Kanban cards. So all of that should be in here someplace. Yeah. I create a request, I save it to the collection that's shared with the team. And with webhooks, everybody instantly has it. So it's really an amazing tool for collaboration. Now anybody on the team can just point and click to get Kanbans. I'm not going to show you the actual body of the request for privacy reasons, but I just wanted to say that this really supercharges API development and debugging for your in a team context as well. Okay. So we've talked about workspaces and collections, and really folks, like if you know these things, like how to make request response and deal with cookies and saving things, how to make collections and how to share your collections with like team workspaces, you are in a really sweet spot for supercharging your API development. And some of you in the chat have already mentioned you use Postman every day. I'm also one of those people. And the more and more I use it, especially now that it has this UI that's really, it has like wizards for teaching you how to do different things inside of the application. I'm learning every day all new powerful features that it has. So I just made a quick list here of some cool things that you might want to move on to learn about in Postman after playing around with it a bit, including you can write scripts in Node that happen like pre-request and post-response, meaning say you have a collection with 7 requests and you can actually run all of them automatically in a sequence using something called the collection runner. So you'll see up here there's something called runner, and it opens a new window and you can look at any collection that you have and you can select only the requests that you want to do, and you can say like I want to do it in this order, like say I want to log in as admin and then get all the meets and then log out for some reason. But then you just click run right here, and it's going to run all of these requests in order. And if you had written test in like Node for pre or post scripts, it's going to give you the result of all those tests as well. And you can export that to a file. So you can see how that is super handy with continuous integration and development. Should you replace your unit tests like in your code with Postman? I don't know. Like I feel kind of weird about that. But maybe I'm just a stickler for tradition. I'm finding that Postman is so powerful that maybe you could, but I prefer just to make my collections and kind of point and click my way through stuff while I'm developing, and use Postman as something in addition to writing unit tests that will run every time that your code is, pushed into your CI/CD flow. But that's just personal preference. For those of you that go on to learn more about Postman, maybe you'll find you like using the Postman interface for testing. Yeah, So there's so much to talk about. I do want to leave stuff open for questions. If any of you guys might know a cool feature too you'd like to share, feel free to reach out. But that's your Postman 101. And yeah, let me know if you have any other questions or comments in the chat, or open your mic up. It's very
Hi, Claire.
quiet.
Hey. It's your favorite Redwood contributor. The big question is, how can I buy GameStop stock with Postman?
A little birdie told me you'd be asking that question. That's a great question. I don't know. Do you have a favorite go-to stock API that you know of?
No, I don't actually know of any APIs, but I'm sure there must be some out there, right?
There are actually, because the little birdie asked me that, told me that might be a question, I did look it up. And the stuff about stock APIs is they all want you to, you know, get that auth token because they want to rate limit you so that you aren't, I don't know, making an API that short sells stocks or something. I don't know. But I couldn't find any like easy API that didn't require an access token. But definitely you guys, like if you are up for the challenge of making an access token and putting it in your headers here, I think it's usually like authorization or something, like the docs will tell you.
You probably have an easier time trading crypto because there's a lot more integrated APIs for things like Binance and stuff like that.
What do you mean integrated API?
As in like, so basically if you go onto an exchange like Binance, like there is a Binance API that like you just literally connect to, and then that's how you can do all your trading. So yeah, so basically what Rob is talking about has already been optimized in crypto exchanges and would probably be a lot easier to do. I've never done it myself. I just know that back when I was in the crypto world, that was a big thing.
Yeah, so if you know of any public APIs out, or if you have a Binance account and you can make these Binance API requests, you could totally be watching GameStop from Postman. You can just check your Postman every couple minutes and see whether to buy or sell or to hold. Any other questions?
When you mentioned running it as a test suite, can you invoke Postman like through the command line, or do you have to use this GUI?
There is a command line tool called Newman, I think. I haven't used it. Yeah, Newman CLI. It's specifically a tool for integrating Postman with your CI/CD. So you can run collections on the command line with Newman. It allows you to run and test the Postman collection directly from the command line. So if you get this CLI tool, yes, you don't have to use this GUI, as sexy as it is.
That's cool though. You could build it up in the GUI visually and developers can share it, but then it also becomes part of your test suite. That's awesome.
Yeah. That's why I think Postman is a great tool for people that are, you know, still in the very, very beginning learning phases of making HTTP requests, because you can see everything. Like the world of working with a front end and React, you can see all of your changes, you know, with the hot reloading going on in the browser. When you're dealing with an API, it's just kind of like a black hole. It's kind of hard to navigate unless you're in the, I mean, if you're good with the terminal, you can, but you don't know what is available to you. And Postman kind of gives you these nudges like, oh, okay, you could put params on that request. You could have headers in that request. You could have a body. And that's why for devs that are still learning, I think Postman is great, the application. So we've got a question from Fran. If you send a login post request on Postman, then you don't open the browser, will you be logged in? Great question. Postman, the app, has its own little context that it's collecting cookies from. However, there is a Chrome extension, or I think maybe other browsers as well, called the Postman Interceptor. And that will link up your Postman cookies with your browser cookies. So say you logged in as Randy in Postman. You could actually navigate to my app and you would be logged in as Randy if you had the Postman Interceptor setting on. And I think that's what this little satellite thing is. Yeah, you can say like you capture cookies on or off. To me, it kind of freaks me out a little bit to connect Postman with my browser for some reason. So I just keep them in two separate worlds. But definitely, if that's going to help you with your development, turn on the Postman interceptor. All right. We've got some stock trade discussion going on in the chat. Any other Postman related questions?
You know, because when I first used it, it was only a Chrome plugin, and they transitioned to like a full, standalone app. But do you know why they did that? Was it limitations on what they could do in Chrome, or they realized, oh, this is an actual business, we can build our real app here?
I don't know the story behind it, but definitely it's still available as a browser application. And actually, that's one thing I forgot to mention is when you install Postman as a desktop app on your computer, you're actually making an account in the cloud with Postman. So you can access the Postman from anywhere, any computer, even if you don't have the Postman desktop app. And the cool thing is when you're saving stuff to your own like private workspace in your Postman app, it's also saved in the cloud. So you can you can spill coffee all over your computer and it breaks, and you can just download all of your collections again. No worries there. And that's also why you can share your requests with teammates in the cloud as well.
And the Chrome extension and the desktop are the same interface. They're always in parity with each other. It's not like one's
I don't know,
wrong or
especially after the new rollout of the desktop UI. I haven't checked it out. Let's see.
Yeah, I'd be very surprised if the Chrome extension has all of the functionality, because going back to the history, I listened to a podcast with the creator once, and this was really a tool that someone just created for themselves because they wanted it, and then it turned out to be so useful that more people started contributing to it, and it just grew and grew and grew and grew and kind of became this like runaway train. So I would almost be certain that they hit limitations at some point with the Chrome just kind of extension, because you can only do so much. You're limited to the browser's APIs.
Yeah, I just checked it out in the browser, and it's not a Chrome extension. It's like literally in the browser. You get an interface that looks very similar to the desktop application. It's in light mode, but it looks like it does almost all the stuff that a desktop app would do. Has environments and everything. But yeah, like Anthony said, it's such a powerful tool that it's a lot to include in a browser interface. So yeah, definitely go for the desktop app, I would say. And you don't have to get any Chrome extension or any of that type of thing. I just stick around with the desk app.
And what's their paid plan? It looks like it's to do the sharing.
Yeah, you can see, I hope nobody from Postman that works at Postman is in this call. We've gone over our sharing limit at Mintbean. You get like 20, I'll say Postman is super generous for its free tier. Even with the remote collaboration, they give you like 25 free requests that you can share with your team. So you can kind of get a feel for how working with Postman in a team would be. As you can see in the Mintbean collection, we've got like well over 25. So it's giving me this little warning that like, hey, you're beyond your limits, upgrade your plan. So yes, there are paid plans, which I think I really recommend for teams that start to rely on Postman for debugging. Let's see, I think it's very reasonable pricing too. Maybe like $15 a month for the small team plan, or even less, $12. Yeah, I think it's pretty reasonable. Sweet. We got 5 minutes left. If anybody's sticking around, feel free to ask any questions. And thanks for all the great questions so far. So Mahivir says, what about other tools like Insomnia? And this is a tool I haven't used before, but Anthony, are you still on the call? Because I think you said that you use Insomnia.
Yeah, totally. I was actually gonna ask the same question about other tools. Yeah, so with Insomnia, it's, to me, the main value prop with Insomnia is it's really clean, a simple interface for like just doing like API calls. So I would imagine they have built out their feature set to compete with Postman, but to me, I'm not really looking for like this Uber API tool. I'm looking for something that's gonna be clean, simple, and easy to use. So that's what appeals to me about Insomnia. I think it's worth looking at, but it's not going to give you all the power you would get from Postman, but it's definitely like works really well. I enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm looking at it online right now, and it seems like it has the same functionality as Postman in terms of request and response. I don't know, having seen both of them, Anthony, like, is there one that you prefer right now?
And there's also another thing to keep in mind. Someone says that Insomnia has GraphQL autocomplete. So Insomnia is slightly more optimized for GraphQL in general, I think. I think Postman, they've kind of been adding on GraphQL functionality on top of the REST functionality, whereas Insomnia, I think GraphQL was treated a little bit more like a first-class citizen. So I am, hugely biased towards GraphQL. Like I work on a GraphQL framework and I work for a GraphQL company. So that's going to be what's going to keep me kind of in Insomnia for a while. But if I was kind of like recommending something to beginners, I think Postman is really like kind of the lingua franca right now. And I would imagine for you, like it was probably a huge boost up in terms of like how you got integrated with Mintbean and kind of like workflows and stuff like that. So for the workflow stuff, I think Postman's definitely going to have Insomnia beat there. But for clean UI and GraphQL functionality, that's where Insomnia, I think, is still on top.
Gotcha. So if you're like doing some GraphQL development and want that autocomplete, maybe Insomnia is the way to go. If you're doing like team collaboration and just like a broader suite of stuff, Postman. And
yeah, that's a good way to put it, yeah.
Somebody in the chat reminded me that they asked about the VS Code integration. And it looks like there's some extensions you can get to run your Postman collections from inside VS Code. I've never done it, but it definitely looks possible. And yeah, so that's that. Any other questions? Oh, I will say, like, when you guys said autocomplete and Insomnia being optimized for GraphQL, I agree with Anthony in that, like, GraphQL seems sort of still like an afterthought in Postman. Like, you can obviously do it, but it doesn't make it pretty for you. Like, you can do this and it's not going to complain. You'll notice there's nothing here, but if you go to a not GraphQL request, like, how do I get out of here? Go to my personal workspace and go to a not GraphQL request. So for like that API that I'm making here, with the JSON request, like I can make this really ugly and Postman will beautify it if I click beautify. Aha, much better. But it's not going to beautify it for GraphQL. So yeah, if you're a GraphQL dev, I'd say still check out Postman because the collection stuff is really nice. But maybe Insomnia is something to check out too.
Can you demo that visualize thing in the next minute? Do you have anything you can visualize?
I've never used it actually. Turn raw response data into beautiful graphics by adding visualizers. Learn how. Well, this is what it would look like if you did it right.
So if it returns like a certain format for bar graphs or D3 format or something.
Yeah, maybe you it's added to the test for requests. So I guess like in this tab here called tests, you can write node code like postman.something, and maybe you can set up how the data should be visualized in here. The cool thing with the
your
new
boss who doesn't know how to read code,
or yourself, sometimes nobody hates a graph. But the great thing about the new Postman desktop app is all of like the documentation is accessible from here. So you can just click learn and it'll say like, oh, how do I write a test? Here's how. So I have taken an hour of your life and I hope that just this really kind of basic intro to Postman, even if you've already used the tool before, maybe now you're inspired to not be intimidated by the UI and kind of dig into what it can be providing for you in terms of making more efficient and less painful API development. So thank you guys. And good to see some familiar faces in the chat and really good to see some new faces.
Awesome.
And
all right, guys, thank you so much for joining. I just wanted to drop a quick note. We actually had somebody from the Postman team on the call today, and they're actually on the Discord server. I feel like I'm going to butcher their name. Claire, can you help me out and just pronounce, is it Arlene?
I'm not sure who it is actually. Is it in the list?
Yeah, it's Arlemi. I feel Arlemi, please jump in and stop me from butchering your name. That's the
That's the one. Yep.
Oh, okay.
Awesome. Yeah, so he's
Wonderful.
on our Discord server. Feel free to ask him any questions that you might have about Postman. And just wanted to drop that quick note.
Yeah, and don't tell on me for going over the free tier limit on the workspace. Sorry about that.
You should go over the free tier. That's what it's for.
I'm getting convinced that it's worth buying. And I did not get paid by Postman to do this workshop, by the way, guys. I just really like this tool and I think it will help you.
This is not a sponsored event. So yeah. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. I've dropped the Discord link in the chat. I think someone is not on our server. Looking forward to the next workshop. And Claire, you did a wonderful job.
Thanks, guys. Happy developing.
Take care. Bye.